Welcome to the Data Room, where we share best practices and actionable tips on being a data-driven company, or as we call it, data first. If you're a B2B revenue leader looking to scale your growth stage business, come and join experienced CEO and tech founder Scott Stouffer in the Data Room. All right, welcome back to the Data Room. I am here with scaleMatters CEO and co-founder Scott Stouffer. I'm Heather Kitos. We are here today to talk about something that everyone has said at one point probably in their career, this common phrase that's thrown around about being data-driven. Now, every company claims to be data-driven, but Scott, I actually think there's kind of a misconception that we'll take some time to talk about. What is being data-driven, and why is there a misconception about it?
Yeah, so we have some opinions on that, given that our role in life is to help companies be really good at leveraging data. But I'd say what we've seen over talking to many, many growth stage tech companies is they view themselves as data-driven, meaning that they want to use data to help them make their decisions, to inform them, et cetera. But what we've noticed, and this is pervasive, is that most of them don't have the data in place to be proactively data-driven. I mean, if you think of just about the words data-driven, that would imply data comes first, and then you do something comes second. You're driven by it, right? And what we see is, I'm going to say companies are performance first, data second. So at the high level, they understand how much they've booked, right? Or how many deals they've booked. But it's generally not until they're concerned, because they're not, those numbers are not where they want them to be, that they start looking for other data to help them understand why. And so those companies, and again, this is probably the majority of the companies that we see, they search for data reactively because they know they've got problems. And so what you see then with that reactive approach to trying to find data is you get people frustrated because they don't find it. You know why? Because they never built their data infrastructure in the first place to surface certain things that they might want to answer. And so contrast that concept where performance concerns cause you to go look for data to help you get better. That's what most companies that call themselves data-driven actually do. With the notion of you've got this super comprehensive and elegant approach to data that is what drives what you do. So the data itself shows up first, and it highlights or it exposes issues that then cause you to take action. And so it's kind of a timing issue. And we use the terminology data first at our company simply to try to make that nuanced but significant distinction between, are you searching for data after the fact to help you, or do you have the data kind of built in at the beginning, which is what informs all the decisions and initiatives you take? And one of the reasons it's so important to be data first is it gives you time to change behaviors or change outcomes before it's too late. So for example, I'll just, a lot of companies, particularly on the sales side, put a lot of energy into looking at pipeline and pipeline waterfalls. Where did we start the period? What came in terms of new opportunities? What was closed, won, or lost? What changed value? What was the ending pipeline, right? Because they sort of want to understand, is the pipeline moving in a way that we want it to? And that's great. Or they'll use pipeline inspection tools out there to understand of the deals in the pipeline, which ones seem to be the most legit, which ones aren't, so they focus. It does help them to focus their sort of immediate term energy on stuff that can actually potentially close before the end of the period. The problem is, while that's all great, what if the fundamental issue is you're not generating enough top of funnel to begin with to meet your growth goals? By the time you're looking at pipeline stuff, you're down at the very end of the sales cycle. And so while it can make a difference in the short term, it's doing nothing to ensure that 3 quarters from now, your pipeline is actually really where you need it to be.
Right.
And so this is the whole concept of data first is that you set up a proactive and preemptive data environment, which then informs your actions, as opposed to, again, I'd call it data last, but most people who do this think of themselves as data-driven. But upon running into challenges, we start to go look for data that either supports our gut on what's going wrong or potentially tells us something. And again, at that point, it's generally too late. It's tail wagging the dog. But also, companies that are like that are the ones that often find themselves very frustrated because they can't find the exact type of data they need because they just never set up the environment to begin with to surface this stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking as somebody that has been in marketing teams and stuff, I personally can attest to, you see something, you launch a campaign, for example, it doesn't come back or it doesn't perform the way you expect it to. You're looking for the data to justify that, rather to kind of take a step back and look at whether, the right things were in place to figure out, even if the campaign was meant to be, a good decision in the first place. So I think a lot of...
on that particular point, Heather, I've met with a fair number of marketing leaders who embrace this concept of fail fast. And because what that really is it's a phrase that goes along with the notion of experimentation. But where so many companies fall down on that front. So they think of themselves as sort of data-driven because we'll experiment and the things that fail we won't do again, et cetera. But they actually, if you think about science and the concept of experimenting in science is you start with hypotheses, you put these very rigorous test plans in place so you can measure the outcome and then iterate based on it. But most of these companies, these people that I'm referring to that talk about fail fast or experimentation in the marketing side with campaigns, actually do not put rigorous enough data protocols in place to actually really know if a campaign did not deliver. Well, first of all, what was the objective of the campaign to begin with? Secondly, if it didn't deliver, why didn't it deliver? They know it didn't deliver, but they generally don't start their campaigns with part of building the campaign is an ability to measure it at a very granular level so that we know the whys to the outcome, not just the outcome. So, it's just another case where companies think of themselves because they're kind of experiment. They have experimenting mentality and stuff. They think of themselves as sort of scientific and data-driven, but they're not because they actually don't finish the job of putting all the ability to truly test the whys behind these outcomes.
So if you are you're hearing this, you're like, oh yeah, our company's capturing a lot of data, but not really data first. What are your actionable tips? What are your kind of go-tos to start to evolve to being from a data-driven company to a data-first company?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this other times. The companies that are best at data actually have someone in their staff that's all they own or think about. So and that typically would be like a business analyst role, potentially in a RevOps team, potentially, reporting directly to a CRO or something like that. But the business analyst is the person that can help the marketing team, right? As they're starting to think through campaigns, can help them think about, all right, well, how can we measure precisely along the way that this campaign's going in order to understand the whys behind what we're actually going to experience rather than just the experience itself. So it really requires at least one person in the sales and marketing staff that thinks this way. And those tend to be very analytical people. They're data analysts, business analysts. And of course, and I know this is going to stereotype, but salespeople are great salespeople, right? They're great at getting people to kind of move off of status quo and this sort of stuff. Marketing people are great at marketing, which is sort of messaging and this sort of stuff. Neither of those functions typically are built out of engineers, analysts, math people, right? And those are the people who think more that way. So I guess the first thing that I try to recommend to many, many companies is that if they are serious about being good at this stuff, then you have to hire somebody who thinks, lives, and breathes this stuff.
Totally makes sense. I mean, yeah, marketing and salespeople are not the first when you think about jumping into the data and like you said, living, breathing, sleeping, eating, all the things that come with data. But I love this conversation about, maybe we need to rethink about what data-driven actually means and evolve. If you're a growth stage company, how can you start being data first? And if you are thinking about, this stuff is resonating with you and you want to be a data first company, the first step, in addition to what Scott had mentioned, I would recommend going to scalematters.com/assessment. We actually have a complimentary data maturity assessment for you to figure out whether you are on the road to being data first or just getting started. So definitely check out scalematters.com/assessment. I want to thank you, Scott, as always, for jumping into the data room with me. I'm Heather. That's Scott, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks very much. See you, Heather.